Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District meeting, April 25th at 6:30 p.m. And welcome any visitors and also the staff for attending this evening. So why don't we start off by having a roll call for attendance? Tori, if you could do that, please.
Manager Lowe. Oh,
He may be in the car.
okay. Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Dave, you might be muted.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Hi,
now we
okay.
can hear you.
Okay,
Manager Taves. President Schmaltz.
Here. So we have a quorum this morning, or this afternoon. Let's move on then to setting the agenda. Are there any suggested changes or additions to the agenda? Okay, I do have one after talking with Administrator Kinney. During the last week or 10 days, since we've launched the shoreline restoration program, we've had a lot of activity in that area. So we'd like to add a few items to the agenda. The first one is we need to approve a cover letter to be sent to the Forest Lake Association announcing the April 29th shoreline restoration workshop. We also have found out that the city of Forest Lake is going to be redoing their shoreline, and which is an extensive project, and they have a meeting upcoming, I think, May 10th or 19th, and we want to participate in that. So that's kind of timely. And then the third item is a relationship with the DNR in terms of the relates to shoreline restoration. So we'd like to add those three items to the agenda and just briefly talk about them and get approval for staff to move ahead and work on those three small topics. Any other additions to the meeting agenda? Okay, hearing none, then I'll entertain a motion to accept the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. Do we have a second to that?
I'll second.
Thank you, Chris. Tori, could you do a roll call vote?
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Baki.
aye,
I'm gonna call Manager Taves just in case he joined in. Manager Taves. President Schmaltz.
Aye. So, motion carries. Moving on then to the consent agenda. This evening, we have a number of minute meetings that we have been postponing, so I'll just go through them quickly. We have the special board meeting minutes of January 23rd, regular board meeting minutes of January 25th, regular board meeting minutes of February 8th, regular board meeting minutes of February 22nd, regular board meeting minutes of March 14th, and regular board meetings minutes of March 28th. So we need a motion to accept the consent agenda. I'll make the motion that we accept the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Manager Anderson seconds. Troy, would you do a roll call vote?
Manager Lowe.
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
aye,
President Schmaltz.
Aye. So the motion carries. Moving on to item 4, the public open forum, and I declare the public open forum open. Are there any guests or visitors that would like to address the board? I'll ask the question again. Are there any visitors or the public that would like to address the board through the Zoom meeting? Okay, hearing none, then I'm going to declare the public forum closed. Moving on to item 5, the Citizen Advisory Committee update. And Manager Kinney will be joining us shortly. You'll see he's on board already. Okay.
Yes,
Mike, do you want to have Aiden cover that?
yes, please. Aiden is here this evening. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. President, managers. I've provided the notes of the April Citizens Advisory Committee for you here. This last month at our meeting, we reviewed a kind of outline of the budget process that Emily was able to provide. And then Emily also provided a really nice overview of the progress report and the annual report that the Citizens Advisory Committee was able to give some input on, and it was, in short, a good meeting this month. And I'll also note that I have Manager Anderson on the schedule to attend our May CAC meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, any comments or questions for Aiden? Okay, none, then thank you very much, Aiden.
Thank you.
Moving on to new business, the first item is the 2023 audit report.
Mr. President, managers, we have Andy Berg from Abdo. Andy has been working with the district well, from the very first audit that Abdo has been working for the district under that. So he's very familiar both with the district as a whole as well as the audit elements. The district treasurer Anderson and myself, Redpath, and Abdo had met previously on the review on the preliminary piece, and this is the final draft audit for presentation. So Mr. Berg will go over. I think he has a presentation to go over, and then there's time for questions. Ready, Andy?
I'm ready. Thank you, Mike. I will go through this presentation once I get my screen shared, which I believe you guys can view now, and you also had in your packet. Mike did mention it's a final draft, so once we get done with this meeting, we will finalize the report and get the full audit finalized. Like Mike mentioned, I'm Andy Berg with Abdo, partner here at Abdo. I've been with the firm working on my 30th year now and have worked with the district for a number of years. Tonight, what I'll go over is the audit results, and then we'll look at some of the individual funds of the district. So the end result of our audit is that we issued an opinion on your financial statements. We issued an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion. As part of the audit, we do gain an understanding of the district's internal controls for planning the audit, not to give an opinion on the effectiveness of the controls. If we did notice something, we could report an internal control finding. There are no findings reported at all in the audit, so really good results. As part of the audit, we also issue a report on Minnesota legal compliance. We test a number of different areas that the state auditor has us test, anywhere from cash and investments to contracting and bidding to debt service. Clean report there, no Minnesota legal compliance findings to report. So jumping into the district's different funds, you do have 3 different funds. So you have your general fund, your implementation fund, and then the debt service fund. So starting with the general fund, we give you a 5-year history of the ending general fund balance in that black line. And we compare that to your next year's budget, the orange line. You can see there's been some fluctuations over the years. So there's a jump in 2021 up to 50%. Really as a result of a transfer in from the implementation fund. There was a decrease in 2022, ending at just 2.4% of the 23 budget. And then you'll see the fund balance did go up in 23, ending at about 20% of the 24 budget. If we look at the reason for that increase, the biggest reason was again, you did a transfer in from the implementation fund of about $370,000 to get that ending fund balance up to $105,000. Looking at the activity, the first row there is your revenues. So total actual revenues, $264,000, budgeted $263,000. So really close to budget there. Expenditures did come in a little bit higher than budget, $63,000 over. Total expenditures at $539,000 compared to the budget of $476,000. So revenues under expenditures at $275,000. Like I mentioned, you transferred in that transfer almost of $370,000. So fund balance did go up $93,000, ending that at the $105,000. Now, if we look at the program and project implementation fund, this is your main fund where the bulk of your activity flows through. So all your program and project costs, The different grants run through here. This is where the transfer from that went into the general fund came from. So here again, we give you a budget to actual. Total revenue about 2.4 million of actual, under budget by 1.6 million. And really some of these revenue and expenditure variances are a result of timing of the different program and projects you do, mainly some of the bigger projects. Program costs were under budget by about 235,000, and then your project costs were under budget by about 695,000. So total revenues under expenditures by 947,000. You have had a number of different, or you have two loans out there where you've done draws on those loans, so that when those loans are issued, it's shown as other financing source. So you did issue 987,000 loans in 2023. Now for governments, it does get a little confusing. So really those are loan proceeds on the fund statements. So in your funds way to your budgets it's shown as that other financing source. When we go and report on the full government wide, that's full accrual, and that's really recognized as a loan payable. And we'll see your debt service fund where you're paying back those total loans. Again, you transferred out that 369,000. So total fund balance really decreased as a result of that transfer, decreased 330,000, ending at an ending fund balance of 584,000. Now, if we look at your debt service fund, here's where you're paying back those loans from a levy. So you levied about 350,000. You had some other related expenses of about 9,000. You did pay back principal of 150,000, which that amount's going to go up significantly in the future. So that's going to go up closer to that 350,000. So total fund balance increased 206,000, ending at 407,000. So if we want to look at the loans outstanding, you have about 2.9 million as of 12/31/23 outstanding, made up of those two different loans. The first one back in 2020 of 1.2 million, and the second one where you drew down on that this year, close to $1 million, with outstanding principal of about 1.7 million. So really the interest rate is zero, so you're just paying back that principal over a period of time. So that is a quick summary of the financial information. I'd be happy to take any questions you have on that or on the actual financial statements.
So before we take questions, let's get the motion on up and running and get a second to it, if we could. If somebody could read that motion.
Give me just a second. Go ahead.
Anybody want to read that?
I'll move to accept the Abdo prepared management letter and annual financial report of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District for the year ended December 31st, 2023, and direct staff to forward the information to the state of Minnesota as required.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. Do we have a second of that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Manager Baki. We have a motion and a second, so let's open up the floor for discussion and questions of Andy.
Manager
Go ahead.
Smalls.
Yeah,
Manager
go ahead,
Smalls,
Manager Baki.
I have a question regarding what is the recommended fund balance in terms of a percentage?
That's a good question, and that really is going to be dependent on the revenue sources and which fund you're looking at. So your general fund really supported with a property tax levy, and that comes in twice a year, the first one halfway through the year. So really you need probably about 50% to meet the expenditures in your general fund. Now the program and project implementation fund, when you're looking at that, we really don't show that as a percentage, because that's really dependent on when you're going to do projects, when you're going to have big projects, and how those are being funded, whether you're paying for those in cash, paying for them with loans or grants. So that one's a little more difficult to look at, and really is better to plan out 3 to 5 years of, hey, what are our sources coming in to pay for these projects? How much are the projects going to be? And that's going to really answer the question, how much you need in this fund.
Thank you.
Any other
You're welcome.
questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, then I'm gonna call that, we'll call vote for Tori.
All right, Manager Lowe. Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Did
Manager
you get my
Bach,
eye? Sorry.
We have it now. Thank you.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
President Schmaltz.
Aye, so motion carries. Thank you, Andy, appreciate it again.
Thank you.
Manager Schmaltz,
Yes, Manager Baki, go ahead.
I'd just like to comment that there were no findings in the audit, which is a good sign.
We're used to hearing that.
Yeah, we're used to hearing that, so we'd be very surprised if there wasn't.
Yeah.
Andy's been very very thorough with us. Thank you, Andy. So that's a good track record we have. That's a credit to staff and how they handle everything for us. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Any other comments or questions? If not, we'll move on then to our next item, Cultivate Advisor Strategic Planning Support. And this is a guest. I think we're having Colin Bowman. Mike, did you want to make any introductory comments to this new group for us?
Mr. President Manager, so Emily and I have been meeting with Colin for, some number of months, and then I had suggested originally that you and I meet with him to get an idea. This had to do more with strategic planning initiative and that work that I've been discussing with the board for some amount of time. And we decided that it was probably just good to have Colin in to meet with and talk with the whole board to get a sense of who they are and what they could bring to the district. So Colin, thank you for that video. I hope the manager had a chance to review that. We did send something out and I requested that they take a look at it. But other than that, I'll let Colin take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Good to be here for the group. And I really enjoyed watching this whole process up to this point. So thanks for letting us be a part of this. In terms of how we go about this, I'm going to try to condense. I'll make sure we hit or beat our 20-minute target here. And I could do one of two things. I could start from the beginning for those that haven't watched the video and do a quick recap of the work that's been done so far and kind of the strategic roadmap that we've collaborated on with Emily and Michael. Or I could just take questions from the group if everyone's gotten a chance to watch that recap already, so it's not redundant. Either one would be fine with me.
Number one, not option.
Number one. All right, perfect.
That's my vote.
Yeah.
Awesome. Is there any way I could get the screen to share? Sometimes just connecting the visuals can help make it clearer for the group. Oh, thank you. Awesome. So again, this will seem like a lot, and I know it's recorded, so you can review it at a later time if you'd like. We all got connected to Michael and Emily through a partner of ours called Grant Station, and our team at Cultivate, we're all entrepreneurs who have scaled and exited businesses that now work alongside other organizations to scale and optimize that organization, many of which are for-profit small businesses, and many of which are also nonprofits or local government entities like the Comfort Lake Forest Watershed District. So that's just a little bit of background. And essentially what we did is I don't know, Michael, at this point, maybe 3 hours of one-on-one time with yourself and Emily, where we asked a bunch of questions about where we're trying to take the organization, what we're problem solving to get there, what leverage to pull to scale and optimize what you've all built so far. And we could make this really complicated, but just to boil it down, we found that there was a few key priorities to get there. One was getting a bunch more private landowners on board, especially with a shoreline restoration focus. General staff productivity, which it can cover a lot of things, but that was a big priority. It sounded like sourcing more grant revenue, sounded like about 1 million in grant revenue per year was the target. And just general community engagement, right? And convincing property owners to get more involved in the shoreline reduction and needing to generate, different systems as you grow it. So that was the high level target. And then from there, what we did, and I'm gonna get my screen share going here, is we looked at the organization as though it was kind of like a propeller. So here's what I mean when I say that. And I think this is working, but it's not my Zoom link. Can everyone see this? See some heads nodding. All right.
Yeah, we've got it. It's good. That's good, Colin.
Excellent. Okay. So the metaphor that we use when looking at the organization is that it's kind of like a propeller. right? So to the presentation that was just given, you know, the financials are the engine. That's what gives us the runway to move forward, and has the you know, a lot of the strategy connected to it. You know, if we're going to spend money on sales or marketing, or if we're going to recruit more staff, or we're going to have a different distribution policy, like all those things are connected to financials. And then sales and marketing, it's probably not in the traditional way that a small business would look at it, but like getting more supporters or getting more buy-in from the community, that's, you could argue that's more of a sales and marketing approach. And then there's the capacity piece, right? So recruiting great people and putting them in the right seats, having the right layer of leadership to then lead through that as the organization grows, and Michael and Emily continue, and this group continue to grow it. And then around the whole thing is productivity, right? Which could mean technology, automation, stuff like that, or it could mean systems, playbooks, things to scale, right? So we did a deep dive into every one of these areas of the organization. And then from there, we built this roadmap. And I'll just do a quick check-in. Can everyone see this? Is this too small to read?
Great.
You can see
I
it,
can
okay?
see it just fine. Yeah.
All right, cool. So I'll caveat all this by saying that the best way to accomplish none of this is to try to do it all at the same time. So that's not how we work. We essentially prioritize this into quarterly objectives and meet with the leadership of the organization, typically 1 or 2 people. So maybe Michael or Emily, or, you know, whoever else is a big proponent of this type of work, and do bi-weekly meetings to not just work on the strategy, but also work on the creation and kind of the build and the implementation of a lot of these systems. But on the financial engine of the organization, we just looked at having a growth pro forma, right? Like similar to a small business, if we have a certain set of goals to hit, from whether it's financial or whether it's locations or members, or however we want to map this out, having a pro forma of some sort. So again, this will look like a lot, but really when we break it down, it'll look much more simple, where we've got like probably some revenue goals, some memberships that we want to get on board, any sort of marketing spend or tactics that we want to implement, any leaders that we want to then put in certain seats in the company, or not company, but organization, excuse me, as it grows. And just getting this really dialed in so that we have clear metrics and numbers to go hit, all the way down to even productivity of certain elements of the organization. Looking at certain things like grant sourcing strategy, right? Like maintaining a database, looking at cross-referencing how different funding opportunities align with our priorities, and what's the messaging, what's the outreach to go source some of those. One of the things we had an interesting conversation around was compensation plans, right? With internal members, and like, how do you kind of align? Obviously, the people that join the organization they're very mission driven. They're not there to, you know, go public in a tech company necessarily, but looking at how do we align compensation plans with the organization's goals and incentivize certain behaviors that drive the collective goal of the organization. On the marketing side, I know we're already working with a PR firm, so this is not meant to like duplicate that work. It's just meant to give a different approach, potentially, like for all the local government entities that we've worked with and all the nonprofits that we've seen double or triple in size over the course of several years. They have a bunch of different things they do, right? Versus just one tactic. You know, so some of these things, when we say sales skill, the reason that's in parentheses is not because we're doing transactional sales, but, you know, it could be door-to-door campaigns. It could be some sort of speaking events. It could be some sort of community, you know, initiatives that put us as experts in front of people that will eventually become members, right? This probably doesn't make sense to the group, the don't mess with Texas example, but we often pull this one out when we're looking at just the strategies with winning kind of the hearts and minds of the community. So an example is where that phrase came from was Texas was a very polluted state in the 80s, and they brought in a marketing plan that essentially tried to copy the Smokey the Bear campaign. And the result was an owl that's had the name of John Woodsy Owl, and the tagline was "Give a hoot, don't pollute," and that actually increased pollution in Texas because people would almost mock that owl, and they would throw stuff at it from their car when they were driving by it. And so the new marketing approach was they then interviewed a bunch of denizens of Texas and talked about their backgrounds and kind of what was meaningful to them, and they found that all those people were very proud to be from Texas, and that's where that phrase came from, was "Don't mess with Texas," and the pollution dropped by 80%. So anyway, your approach for this organization is going to be very different, but that's just a high level strategy that, you know, we'd want to get your version of that put together and then deployed through a bunch of different channels, right? On the recruiting side and then kind of on the org chart side, this was more of like clarifying the roles and functions for every different member of the organization. And I'll show you an example. Again, this is a different organization, but it could look something like this, where they've got, you know, maybe members of the board that have a title and a name next to it, and then kind of the core functions of that role in the organization, all the way, you know, and as it continues to grow, and again, this is a totally different team, so yours will look different, but the principle is that there's a really clear set of accountability and structure as you continue to bring on people and maybe change roles depending on who's in what seat, and kind of creating your version of that. And then we also looked at, you know, we can make amazing systems and we can make amazing processes, but if we don't have great people in the right seats, it doesn't really matter, right? So the strategy to source, retain, and develop talent within Cumberland Lake Forest Watershed District, and how, you know, there's a whole bunch that goes into that. So again, I'm trying to condense 3 hours worth of conversations into just a few minutes here. But like, how do we source them? What's the comp plan look like? What's the onboarding plan look like? What's the ongoing development look like? What's the meeting structure look like? Stuff like that. And then that all kind of comes into, you know, priority management and micro and macro planning. So to put all this together, where we'd go from here is we essentially would take this and create your version of this. Now, again, this is a different organization that we've worked with for several years that's grown quite a bit in grant funding revenue as the organization's developed, but it's essentially just a one-page, simple to execute plan and has sort of a strategic set of roadmap items along with it, where it's got kind of the vision of where they want to go, milestones for the year, things that they want to track. And it's not just revenue, it's also things like Google reviews. It's really whatever the organization wants to keep a handle on. And then from there, kind of prioritizing all these different items that are really in no order right now, but prioritizing them into quarterly initiatives to then complete and you know, strategically grow as we go along. So again, I know that was a lot, and I just kind of talked at everybody. So I'll pause for any questions or points of clarity. Happy to do that if that'd be helpful.
Anybody have any questions or comments for Colin?
Only that I think this is a well-designed plan that you have. I've worked with these for a number of years. I won't say the number because it ages me. But no, I think it's really well put together, and it's very thoughtful, and it's very progressive, which it needs to be, especially if you're in sort of a growth mode, as we are, and in a transition period. We're changing our focus from heavy projects to more of exactly what you're talking about in that marketing area.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't done a good job of that up to this point, so it's a real deficit. We have a great story, but we haven't been telling it. So we're at the point where we need to get the community on board with what their tax dollars have paid for to date, and then get them excited about the next phase that we're entering. And that's right up that education, marketing, sales, as you called it, alley, because it's going to be getting people involved in not polluting.
Mm.
And so that's you know, right on target for us.
Thanks for sharing that.
Manager Schmaltz.
Yeah, Manager Bakke, go ahead.
When it comes time to make the strategic plan, who will be at the table?
I'll leave that. I trust your all's judgment on that. We've been working mostly with Emily and Michael up to this point, and they've done a great job communicating. Like it was really interesting starting this meeting and kind of hearing all the priorities, and I was like, oh, I wonder what they're going to say, and it was very aligned with all the messaging that we've gotten so far. So we're very open on our end in terms of who is involved. Typically, it's 3 to 5 people. We often find that as we're doing these meetings, if it's more than 5, it can get cumbersome and hard to get stuff done. But we also want to make sure that everyone has visibility. So we usually record all of them and send them to the group for anyone that would like to review.
However, I'd like to add that when it comes to implementing a strategic plan, it's important to have buy-in from the entire staff and board. So, you know, that number 3 to 5 concerns me. I think it should be larger.
Hmm. Thanks for that. And in terms of when it comes to the strategy, just to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, would you want to be involved in every one of those meetings? It's typically 2 hours bi-weekly. It's about the cadence that we found works the best. And sometimes it's like, hey, we really want to bring this idea to it, and then it's our job to kind of create that thing and execute it. So for example, like your version of, let's say this looks basic, I know, but this took like 3 hours to create. And a lot of the members of this organization sent in a lot of thoughts in advance. And then it was our job to kind of create that system with all that input. So we can kind of approach it whatever way is most palatable to the board, but that's just an option for what it could look like.
Sure, I understand what you're saying, and I guess I would want to hear from Mr. Kinney and Mr. Schmaltz as to what they would like to see as a planning team in putting together the strategic plan. Because again, you know, when it comes to implementation, that's the key part. You can have all kinds of plans, but if people aren't buying into it and don't have a reference of understanding, it can just fall flat. So I want to make sure that whatever we spend time putting together, that it is effective.
Any other comments, questions? I just have one, Colin, your staff and that, you said you come from industry or from other companies. What size companies were though? Can you maybe give some examples? Just trying to understand what your frame of reference is.
No problem. Yeah, so my background is in running house painting companies. So I live in Oregon now, and I owned and operated small exterior house painting companies. It was a franchise, so we eventually got to about 65 units, 350 employees, and 20 million in revenue, and then sold those shares in 2019 and skied for like 90 days. And then we've been doing what we're doing now, where it's essentially the strategic growth partners to a bunch of different kinds of organizations, for profit or nonprofit or local government entities, for the last 4 years or so. Many of them come from all different kinds of backgrounds: trades, technology, hospitality, professional services. So we always have one kind of point of contact, but every once in a while we'll bring in a team member that has a really niche specific thing. So for example, the way that we got a lot of our clients was through door-to-door marketing, which actually aligned very well with certain kinds of local government organizations we worked with on messaging and planning that out. And to Dave's point, like the implementation of like, what do you actually say? How do you really get traction on this? So that's kind of been our approach.
Okay, thank you. And how many professionals do you have?
Our team is 45.
45, okay.
Nationwide.
Nationwide. Okay.
All over the country. Yep.
Thank you.
I just wanted to,
Another question, go ahead.
well, not a question really, just a follow-up comment to what Manager Baki was talking about. Have you ever worked with government entities before?
Yeah. Yes.
Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, there was one in Southern California that had a program for essentially kids who had parents incarcerated. And we had to give, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, from like the strategy of how do you put the plan together to grow members and to grow supporters and to get grant revenue. And that was in 2020 when we started with them, and their whole world got turned upside down because their fundraising was from like in-person events, which you couldn't do anymore with COVID. So we had to come in and basically take a whole different approach to sourcing and building systems and building kind of strategies to both get the members as well as change the org chart.
Yeah, well, I think just to kind of underscore what Manager Baki was driving at least I believe this is what he was driving at. When you're dealing with a government entity like we are, especially a small one, we have a relatively small radius of area, and we are appointed by our counties to represent the people in the hydrological zone that we happen to be in or near. And so we're the closest touch to the people, the board members are, and they need to be involved in this process. It can't just be staff. It has to be inclusive of the board members and to their ability to participate. So I just wanted to emphasize what he said. I think it's very important.
That's great perspective. Thank you.
I have another question. You've met with, Emily and Mike, our administrator, for a number of hours. How do you see the objective of the assignment that you would get? Which, why are we gonna be spending money for you? What is the outcome that we would expect?
Great question. Yeah, the ones that I had kind of teed up to start off just the whole conversation were, there's a few pillars, right? And one of them was getting a bunch more private landowners on board, specifically for the shoreline restoration, and that like just driving the membership or however you want to phrase it, like the support of that. Another one was getting more grant revenue, right? And looking at the databases, the approach, the cross-referencing, what's going to line up with our outcomes as an organization with that. And then the third one was just the general staff productivity and kind of getting and retaining and developing talent on the internal team.
You know, I thought the objective was gonna be, well, first of all, we're a fairly successful watershed district. We'll get into that in a second, but,
Yeah.
but the initial need, I thought, was the fact that we're trying to, have to relocate and build a building, and that's why we have to get more people involved in that decision. But at the same time, a lot of the grants that we have to apply for, we were told that a strategic plan or a 10-year operating plan probably wouldn't suffice, that we need a more concise strategic plan to get through some of those hurdles. So that's a little different than kind of increasing our sales. For example, we're the largest grant winner. We're one of the smallest watershed districts in the state, and we're the largest grant winner on average for the last 10 years. So we're doing pretty well in grants and that. So we're a pretty successful operation, but we're trying to struggle right now with how do we better position ourselves if we have to go for a different grant source and also for, you know, getting this office building built. So have you any thoughts on that?
That's a really good perspective. Yeah, and I never know what people are going to say on these meetings, so that was really helpful. Yeah, and I guess the perspective I'd have is that it almost is better if we come into an organization when they're not in crisis, and it's almost the opposite of like we've actually been on a pretty strong path so far, and it's just more about the next phase of growth that we're trying to reach. Often when somebody brings in outside help, they think it's because they're in a crisis, and it's almost the opposite in terms of how we prefer to work. So that's just one comment I'll make on like I actually didn't know how you compared to other districts. So that was helpful to hear that. And I know what you mean, you know, I guess because all we do all day long is look at small business owners' plans and nonprofits' plans. And often if it's just numbers, but there's not like a headcount involved, or if there's not like a really thoughtful plan to go source certain marketing objectives, then, you know, that's where it can be objective, you know, an object of scrutiny. So that's just.
So I guess what I'm saying is I'm not sure we need an operational remake, which is kind of what you've done in most of your work. You know, which is very important. Of course, you got an operational for-profit business, but perhaps, you know, people have a trouble understanding, you know, our 3-volume 10-year plan. So we probably need to condense that down to something that's more acceptable to the public and maybe to the other grant people in terms of who we are and what we stand for, what we're trying to get done. So I don't know whether that helps a little bit too, but that's another perspective, I guess, that will probably a need that we have.
That does help, because I've seen plans that are like 50 pages long, and I'm like, it's hard to really even understand it. And often it's counterproductive to that. So like the one that we showed here, this was just it looks like Michael's got his hand up, but this was just a 1-page plan for an organization that's grown a lot, you know, over the last few years. And it's almost when you first look at this, it's almost like, man, this is too basic, but it actually was the one that was the most effective. So point taken for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
Mike has his hand raised.
Who?
Mike does.
Oh, Mike, go ahead.
Mr. President, managers, just wanted to touch base on Manager Baki's questions and then some of the follow-up as well with the other managers. So, you know, well, I guess I'll just start out with our, you know, meeting last night. You know, the board is trying to find its way in terms of what the next cycle of business will be, you know, with succession planning for myself and and that's really, you know, my view on it as a communicator is that I want to make sure as both the board transition and staff transitions that we're set up for success. I know we have a 10-year plan, but we're several years into it already, and we're now shifting from larger capital projects into some of those next tier ones, plus some really big initiatives with this other piece. So MP&G has started in the marketing piece, and But we are very much at the very beginning stages of that. And yes, we continue to hear that people often are looking for some kind of strategic plan, some executive summary or something. And I know we talked about having EOR do that part of it. But I think that, moving forward with some of these other big initiatives, our Greenway Corridor, flood resiliency, and shoreline work, the district could use some help in framing some of those things, and bring in some outside help. And we would have the ability to ask Bowser for some grant funds for this under the performance, the PRAP, so that grant fund is available to the district to help facilitate some of this support. So from my standpoint, the district has a need, and just a function that I guess if the board sees Cultivate Advisors as an entity that could support that. And yes, there's we are functioning well, but we have had our hiccups along the way. We also know that the competitive grant cycle framework is diminishing as they push more money out to one watershed, one plans than the less competitive framework. And then also, if we're going to look at the Lessard Sam's Outdoor Heritage Fund for land acquisition, we have a timeline on that as well, probably another 8 years of that money being available through the current legacy funding mechanism. So it was, years ago, I felt like it was pedal to the metal on the large capital projects, because I knew the competitive cycle, the money eventually, all the communication was that stuff is going to be diminishing and less available. So we're really looking for some new strategies and some new sources as well.
It follows the economy, so economy's doing great, so we've got lots of money coming in. Just one comment I wanted to make on the position of FIRST. It's only for one source of grant monies. It's not the universe of grant dollars. So I think that's important to keep in mind. And as we get into some of these other areas that Mike was talking about, the appropriate grant dollars would be found elsewhere, not through the process that the Clean Water Fund is going through right now. And it will be shifting. How that money gets distributed, like Mike said, is going to be shifting over the next 5 years. So we've got to look beyond that.
Yeah, thank you, Manager. I think Mike said it pretty well. Operationally, we've been successful that, but we do have some issues. And as we've transitioned from where we've been strong in dealing with lakes and lake pollution, et cetera, now we're moving into areas that are less defined, and where maybe some of our skill sets aren't as strong and we're not as comfortable, including dealing with the transition for a administrator that might be leaving in 5 or 6 years. So we may need some help more on some problem areas than an operational makeover, as I suggested before. So, or would you be candidates to take on assignments like that?
Thank you for that. I actually made a note, as well as both of you were sharing, on like the focus on the grant, and so I'm kind of taking notes as we're talking here. Short answer is yes. So I haven't one time ever, and we've done thousands and thousands of advising hours up to this point. Not one time have we seen the plan go exactly as the organization thought it was going to go for the next 12 months. It almost always changes. So the goal is to kind of be proactive and set the objectives 6 to 12 months in advance, but also be adaptable as we get into it with, hey, these priorities could shift depending on when things come in, or the priorities of the board, all that stuff.
All right, we're just running out of time here, so I think we really appreciate your coming in. I think what we need to do is regroup and maybe put together some ideas on areas where we think we certainly need help in, and then see if we can't continue the dialogue in one or more of those areas. Any other comments or suggestions from the board or anyone else that wants to speak?
Just thank you for letting me be a part of this. And
Okay.
I know it's not easy to be critical of the organization with the strangers, so thanks for playing along and letting us get up to this point.
No, I appreciate the effort you put in trying to better understand us and to get ready for this presentation. So thank you. We'll be in touch. Okay, thank you. The next item is, the budget schedule.
Yep, Mr. President, managers, Emily is here to go over that, please.
Thank you, Mr. President, managers. So about this time of year, we usually put together a rough schedule of the budget process. And then sometime in May, bring forward a draft budget. So the budget schedule is in your board packet. Similar to last year, it includes setting up these meetings in May, June, and July to discuss the budget. Suggested that the first meeting would be kind of a budget overview, and me and other staff can give a presentation on a proposed budget. And then use June and July to follow up, and if managers have requests for more information or other changes that they want to see, then we can do that. Right now it says date to be determined for May. We already are scheduling a special board meeting on May 2nd for the floodplain vulnerability workshop, the first and likely multiple workshops for that. And we have a regular meeting on May 9th and then another regular meeting on May 23rd. We're thinking, looking at the agenda for May 9th, there's likely going to be a light agenda and likely going to be enough space. We could, if the board doesn't want to schedule a fourth meeting during the month of May. I think that there's room to do that on May 9th if you would like. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. If there's consensus on that, or if you want to discuss specific scheduling for May any further.
I think it's worked out well in the past. Why don't we just set the schedule when we meet the first time, Emily? I think it will help if we have an overview of where you are at that point in time. It might tell us a little bit about what kind of challenges we have to face in the budget cycle this year. People may want to look at the budget this year, what we got done and what wasn't done. Also, some of those projects may carry over, I guess. But any other comments or questions? Mike, have any comments on this in terms of what he would prefer? Is Mike still with us?
Yes.
Yes, no questions. Mhm. Emily and I talked about it before the meeting.
So we'll just try to set that schedule then when we have the first budget meeting, Mike, and then go from there.
On the 9th.
I think so.
Right from there. Yeah,
I have to revisit the agenda later on, but
maybe I'll get an extra cut more. Okay, so if no other questions, we'll move on to the next item, which is the NREP.
Mr.
Emily, go
President,
ahead.
there's a recommended action if the board would like to approve the schedule and direct staff to prepare the budget.
I didn't hear that one.
Could you repeat that, Emily?
We have a recommended action for you to consider if you would wish to take that action on the screen to approve the budget schedule and direct staff to prepare the preliminary budget.
Yeah, I think we want to do that. I don't know what you've done in the past years, and you put together what your best thoughts are at this point in time. And then we get involved and look at it and then go from there. So I didn't realize we had a motion here, so.
Manager
I'll move-
Schmaltz, I'll make the motion to approve the 2025 budget schedule and direct staff to prepare a preliminary proposed budget that is consistent with the watershed management plan.
Thank you, Manager Baki, and I'll second that. And I'm sorry I missed that, Emily, so thanks for bringing that up. Let's do a roll call vote on that, Tori, if you would.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
President Schmaltz.
Aye. So the motion carries then. We'll be all set for May 9th then. Thank you. Then the next item is item D, the NREP, initial look at the NREP service agreement that's coming due.
Yeah, Mr. President, managers. So, well, I'll just note as well that, Emily has started the budget process typically much earlier, right? In March, we start reaching out to staff and building all the components of it. So staff, we've been working on that, for the last couple of months. So that's why we're able to provide that, or she's put that preliminary piece together and we're ready to distribute it. So one of the things in the budget is the service agreement with MREP. So next 3-year cycle. There's been some discussion on it in the past. And how does how would the board want to, and we'll note that it's not necessarily an action piece, but rather just I want to have some initial discussion about this.
So this is a discussion item. Are there any comments or questions on this area?
Manager Schmaltz?
Manager Baki, go ahead.
So what services do we receive from this MRAP? I guess I'm a little confused here. What is the purpose of this membership?
So the East Metro Water Resource Education Program is Angie Hong and the WCD staff. So that are in the education piece. So Manager Anderson has been very involved with this. He's been representing the district for the last several years. In terms of services, you'll see all the boards should be getting regular emails for distribution from Angie, typically announcing different events. She recently did some different articles, including the one on, speaking for the fish, I think it was, or something along that line. I can't remember the title of it exactly, but so it's been, the education outreach component, the city contractor has it as well. They get to use a lot of the work toward their MS4 permitting requirements. But it was really created close to 20 years ago, probably a good 18 years ago, by the watershed districts of Washington County only initially, to provide a common education platform and messaging. So, and then it's been expanded now through the whole Lower St. Croix. So there's some funds that come in from Lower St. Croix, plus all the additional partners that you now see on that second sheet and what those contributions amount to. So.
If I could just add to this
Yes,
conversation, for the last several years, we've been trying to get on the schedule for the annual meeting of this group that talks about this contract. And it started out, we just talked about this a few weeks ago, or I did with Angie, but it started out, I think there were the 8 members in Washington County, and now there's 33. And they do service the Lower St. Croix. This group has been very successful. You have to think about them really. I think the easiest metaphor is they're the advertising agency for the people that deal with water within the Lower St. Croix. So all the cities, the counties, the watershed districts, the WMOs, all of that have a common mantra or mandate really to educate the people within their boundaries on the same things, water quality, and what does it take to get to water quality. So they standardize all of that sort of messaging and outreach that can be tapped into by all of these members. But if you look at the distribution list of the payments, the watershed districts are calculated on a different basis than the other entities. The other entities are based on population. The watershed districts are based on taxable market value. And so it's not a fair way to do it. I'm going to be at that meeting for the first time. It's coming up in a couple of weeks and early May. And hopefully there will be some consideration that we equalize the burden from just watersheds to all of these other entities that are now part of the mix. But the workload has tripled, quadrupled actually for the 2 people that were on MREP. So they are looking to get more staff. They need more staff. And we can't be sharing that burden for the other people that are coming on board, the watersheds. So hopefully, I don't want us to approve this today because we have to wait and see what the final outcome is going to
It's
be.
discussion item only.
Yeah, okay, good.
So we're trying to get set up for, this is the same discussion we've had every year. So now that Manager Anderson's more directly involved, hopefully we'll get some changes made, but as far as what they do, I think that Angie will normally send out a packet to everybody on what they've done over the past year, but she's recently sent out one, I think, for the last 5 or 6 months. Maybe we could read.
The annual her annual report is out.
It is.
So, yeah, it's out. So it's on their website or
Maybe we could have staff send it to each of the managers and you could just,
or put it on our website.
or put it on our website, we could just flip through it and you'll see
Yeah.
all the work they do.
It's a big report.
Yeah, and I think we get, we get a lot of money's worth out of this, but it's still good to equalize it. We got more people paying for it and we're still paying the same amount of money, so. So Mike, can we have staff maybe put that on the website or so that Dave and other people take a quick look at it?
Yes, we can do that. If that's the board directive. Yes, we can.
It shouldn't be that much time to do it, or else you could just send it to us either way, whatever's easier, so we don't want to take a lot of time, but.
Mhm.
It's important that they see what's happening. Manager Anderson and I have been around for a while, so we've seen it a lot, but be good for them to take a look at all the different stuff they do. Everywhere from setting up seminars to coming to Arts in the Park with us, and, it's quite a bit. Okay,
Yeah, we
anything
can-
else?
We can verify too that or confirm with all the managers that they receive that they are on the distribution list for MREP currently. They should be.
Okay, that's a good point. I know I am, for sure. But for example, and during the summer, Angie puts an article in every Forest Lake Times issue about water. And so, we get a lot of exposure just from that alone. And so now we can actually maybe tap her into doing more local coverage for us, since we got this new shoreline program going. So that's something we have to look at and work on. Any other questions on this before we move on? Okay, let's move on then to AIS. And Garrett?
Yeah, all right, Mr. President, managers, I'll keep things brief, but I'll start off with the April AIS update. Let's get to the next page already. Oops. So some context here. Normally I'd be giving some of these updates in May, but given the unseasonably warm winter that we experienced, the late ice on, the thin ice conditions, the low snowpack, and then the early ice off, the DNR feared that native aquatic vegetation might start growing earlier. So they moved the treatment cutoff date for curly pondweed management from May 31st to April 30th. So by an entire month, that got us running to get all of our ducks in a row, get these treatments underway. Next page. Starting off with Moody Lake, the delineation was performed on April 5th, and Blue Water Science identified about just over 2 acres for treatment near the Moody Lake Park. Staff decided not to do a treatment, however, just given that we are doing research in that area. As you might remember from my year report, we had teamed up with some researchers at the University of Minnesota to do a native plant transplanting project where we pull plants from Pewaukee and try to grow them in Moody Lake, just try to bolster that native plant community diversity and so on. And so this was a location that he had identified where we actually had done the plantings. So we just wanted to avoid any incidental harm, especially with the DNR's consideration with the early native plant growth coming in this season. We just didn't want to take that risk because we'll be continuing that partnership and that research this year and be going out sometime midsummer to do a survey of that location. Bone Lake delineation was performed in mid-April and no treatment was recommended. There was a couple spots of heavy growth in the southwest corner of the lake, but overall, curly pondweed just doesn't seem to be much of an issue. Again, that's a bit of a surprising find. If we were gonna find curly pondweed at high densities in Bone Lake, this was the year we're anticipating it, but fortunately, that's just not the pattern that we're seeing on Bone Lake. Shields Lake, the delineation was performed in early April and Blue Water Science just marked 1.1 acres near the public access. There are some locations of growth around the perimeter of the lake. However, we're going to focus the treatments on the public fishing pier and access to open up that area for navigation and fishing. There will be some control of the other curly pondweed in the lake. However, given that curly clown is the dominant species in this lake, next to coontail, actually having any vegetation, whether it's invasive or not, it's a good thing, especially for spring spawning fish. So with Moody or Shields Lake, we're trying a bit of an experiment where we're just gonna manage a portion of the lake and, open it up for recreation in that regard and kind of reduce phosphorus loading from there, but then also provide a healthy habitat for spawning fish, because again, there are carp in this basin. They are below the management threshold that we confirmed through those surveys a couple of years ago. And we just want to make sure that the native fish population is also being taken into consideration with these treatments. That way the carp doesn't take off and then we have to deal with that problem. Forest Lake was probably the most shocking. Well, it was very shocking. I was fully anticipating having to coordinate a very large treatment this year. And Blue Water Science went out in mid-April and surprised me and only found 15.79 acres of treatment. Primarily, all the treatment locations were isolated to the West Basin. This was, like I said, very shocking. I think everybody in the AIS realm was fearful that curly pond, this was going to be just a crazy year for it, for all the considerations I had previously mentioned. But McComas had shared with President Schmaltz and I, and he had done actually a little bit of a write-up in his lake scientist forum. But his theory as of right now, to try to explain what's going on, is that light ice on and an early ice off did not provide the conditions that normally allow native aquatic plants to fully decay and then basically disintegrate into nothing. And then we'll leave those nutrients available. So it was actually creating a mat that was blocking sunlight from reaching Curly Pond. And so that's just his theory. I think that it does make a lot of sense. It's just another instance though, where you think you have Curly Pond figured out, and it does something strange. So I'm just happy that, it's a smaller treatment this year, and I think we'll have good control with this survey. And then Comfort Lake delineated in early April, and they actually found about 9.5 acres for treatment. This was about as shocking as the Forest Lake finding, as we haven't treated curly pondweed on Comfort Lake since 2015. It's not really following the same trend that Blue Water Science is observing on some other lakes, where we anticipated a big density boom of curly pondweed, but we're not seeing it this year. Comfort Lake, we are seeing it. As to what is going on, it's hard to say, but there have been aggressive management approaches with EWN. Maybe opened up some spots, but it's very speculative, and we'll just have to monitor the situation. But in terms of treatments, we are going to go ahead and manage it. As Blue Water Science is delineating here, there is enough that we can put together some areas for treatment, and I think we'll have pretty good control. Watercraft inspection program update. Currently, we have 8 watercraft inspectors fully hired. We have all the paperwork. I'm in the process of getting most of them trained on. And I think I should have at least 4 or 5 ready to go, hopefully by next Friday, to begin inspections, if all things go well. And then I have probably 1 more inspector that is looking to join the program. We had our lead watercraft inspector, unfortunately, back out at the last minute. But we have a lot of great candidates this year, which we're fortunate for. And I think we'll find a replacement for him. And then President Schmaltz wanted an update briefly on some of the workshops that I had mentioned in the admin report. So very briefly, the April 3rd DNR hosted AIS workshop. This is just an annual workshop, or one of several workshops that the DNR hosts with, folks kind of in my position with local governments and other organizations dealing with AIS management. This one was more of kind of a networking workshop more than anything, just going around introducing yourself, what sort of AIS management activities are involved with, what is working, what isn't, what your struggles. And I think the biggest topic of discussion, which seems to be a trend at this point, is just hiring watercraft inspectors. Fortunately for us, I just had to kind of shrink down in my chair, like, we don't have that problem, sorry. But, you know, we did at least, or I at least took some notes on some different avenues to gather different candidates and maybe some other hiring tactics if we do struggle in a future year. So fingers crossed, you know, things continue to go well for us like it has in the last couple of years, but at the very least, that was a good workshop to meet some folks. The other one, I had briefly described the Moody Lake revegetation project. So on April 5th, I had actually gone to the University of Minnesota to meet with them and again, some other folks in kind of my position and discuss the research. They have secured funding for a research project looking at native revegetation. And they were just trying to gather some preliminary data from people who are actually out in the field performing the work and wanting to know what kind of questions we have, what are the things that we think would be most helpful in understanding this type of project. And so I think there's more workshops to be had on this topic, and that will continue to be able to contribute to this research. But this was just getting the ball rolling. So very interesting stuff. All right. I guess, was there any questions on the AIS update before I move on to the comp plan?
I just have some information to share with you from Chisago County's grant.
Okay.
And especially if you're treating curly leaf, we had designated some dollars for that
Oh.
on big, but Little Comfort, you haven't looked at that yet?
Oh, I should have included that. We did perform that meandering survey on Little Comfort in early April, and I have not had the time to put the map together yet, but we only found several locations of like those, so it doesn't seem
In shallow water?
ranging from 3 to 5.
Okay.
feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll call you and I'll share that data with you,
Okay,
the dollars, okay.
thank you. All right. So the aquatic invasive species comprehensive prevention and management plan. Finally excited to share this with you. Last year, it's been a big effort to try to pull together a lot of different information, both, you know, things that I've been soaking up in the last 5 years being in my role, putting together things that the district has had and then working with partners and stuff to just pull together a more comprehensive plan and just organize thoughts so that there's just one document to reference to see kind of the history that the district has been involved with management and some guidelines and so forth. This document was sent to the manager early on April 12th. It is a rather large document and it was larger at one point, but some feedback needed. We trimmed it down a little bit, recycling some of that for different management plans, but wanted to send it to early to folks in case there was any questions, comments, or edits. I did not receive any prior to this meeting, but at the end here in a couple slides, I can address those if there are any. Next page. So the big question is just what's the purpose of the AIS comp plan? As I had mentioned in the memo, the watershed district's 10-year watershed management plan, it does identify goals and objectives for the AIS program, but they're pretty broad in scope. And so the AIS comp plan just elaborates on those goals, and the mission is to provide consistent standards for AIS prevention. There's these broad goals, and there's a question of, well, how do I reach them, or what tools are available? And so the goal of this plan is to provide a little more structure or guidance, kind of a pathway forward to reaching some of those. The AIS comp plan also serves as a useful resource, I think, for just myself. I wanted to know, well, when I was writing it, I was like, what do I want to know? What are the things I want to remember? What do I think staff would find interesting, or what would help them if they were in my shoes? And then what could I share with local organizations, whether they be other LGUs, Lake Association members of the community. So there's several different topics of this report, ranging from just the introduction where I'm just generally describing AIS. What is AIS? How does it spread? Why are they harmful? I wanted to give transparency and show how the district operates its programs. Why are certain decisions made? What are the goals? And point those out. I wanted to provide information on the district's AIS management history, and also some resources on AIS management. The district has been doing this for a number of years, and there's a lot of, valuable reports and resources. And so, this report is just trying to pull all that together and put it in one place. Next page. So as I mentioned, the comp plan is based upon the district's 10-year watershed management plan. So there's an AIS program description in there with 8 subcategories. Subcategory A is basically just the comp plan, but from there, B through H, it is showing different segments of the plan. And just as a kind of a brief description, summary of what the plan is, starting with watercraft inspections. The goal here was to, again, identify what the goals and objectives are in the 10-year watershed management plan, but then how do we reach those and provide some useful information on hiring and job posting tactics. What is our compensation structure currently? Obviously, that's subject to change, but what is making us competitive in this job market to get people in place or in the position in the first place? How do we schedule watercraft inspectors? What are our resources? What are our partners? What's our budget? And what are we pulling together at the end of the year to report all the good work that we're doing? The AIS early detection and rapid response. I'll be on this one really quick. AIS prevention. Subcategory C. Again, I'm taking the goals and objectives from the 10-year watershed management plan. The 10-year watershed management plan is the general structure, the matrix in which the program needs to operate. And so I am not changing those big goals that were already approved by the board. But in this category specifically, I am at least providing some information or guidance, kind of in that 80-20 rule where how do we reach these goals with the least amount of input possible? And so through my research, identified 5 different, through the DNR's research, I'll give them credit for their great work, but I identified the 5 riskiest pathways for AIS introduction. And so these are the primary goals for this category. So anything that the district is going to potentially do in the future to prevent AIS, to achieve the goals in the 10-year watershed management plan, they're going to be focused on these 5 categories, which will be recreational watercrafts, live bait, gear and equipment, the aquarium trade, and aquatic plant trade. I've identified some of the areas in which we have certain projects already implemented to address some of these things, and then also some areas where we have some work to do.
Garrett, we're not gonna be able to go through all this because we're already over time,
Oh,
so.
sorry. Okay, I can just wrap it up.
And you wanna just show the last couple of slides or whatever, that we have to read this and go through it also, so.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I'll just say that this report though is just the work and combination of reviewing many different documents from outside organizations, whether it's the Wisconsin or Minnesota DNR, other LGUs, some documents from EOR like their Minnetonka AIS plan. And we have had this already reviewed both internally and then also by professional reviews from EOR and Blue Water Science, both of which praised the report and said it was probably one of the more comprehensive plans that they had reviewed for an LGU. And it was actually a resource for EOR. One of the reviewers said it was something that they're going to reference going forward. So.
Good. Yeah, I had a chance to it's been a busy week, so I haven't had a chance to go through all the details, but I did look at it and there is a lot of information in there. So you have done a good job of pulling it all together. So I encourage everybody this is the first draft, so we encourage everybody to look at that. And if you're interested in certain sections, the rapid response is one of the things that we currently don't have in place. So that's an important part of this report. So you might want to take a look at that for sure.
Sure.
Okay, any other questions in the meantime, in case you've had a chance to look at this? If you have any questions for Garrett, we will make time for those. Anybody? Okay, so then thanks, Garrett. We'll be looking for you at the next meeting.
Thanks. Can I elaborate one last thing before
Sure.
People dive into the report? For that AIS rapid response plan, I just want to call out that it's not a step-by-step guide that's going to tell you how to directly address species specific. However, it is a framework in which you can input information into it to address different species. So it's not going to be perfectly laid out for Starry Stonework. It is a broad AIS, rapid response plan pulled from the DNR. And this is something that you are using in the Minnetonka AIS plan as well. It's a modular system where you can take information that you've gathered in the AIS management portion of this plan, insert that data and then have a rapid response plan, if that makes sense. And I can elaborate on that later.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thought we already had that, but that was part of our first AIS initiative with EOR, but it sounds like the same one. But-
Yeah.
But I haven't looked at it yet, so maybe not.
Okay, moving on then, into old business now with the 2023 year in review, annual report and progress report. And the action step here is to approve these today. So we've had a lot of dialogue back and forth on this. I had asked Emily early in the meeting if she had any questions or wanted any clarification on any comments or suggestions made by the managers, and I think you said you were okay with it, Emily, at this point in time?
Yes.
Okay. So does anybody have any other questions or any suggestions before we go into the motion and voting? Okay. So I guess that next step would be to someone recommend the motion, and we need a second.
I'll move to approve the 2023 year in review, annual report and progress report.
Okay, is there a second to that?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Manager Baki. So we have any other discussion or comments or concerns? Okay. So Tori, why don't we just have a roll call vote, please?
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
President Schmaltz.
Aye. So the motion carries then. Thanks, Emily, for all the work and handling all those suggestions. It's an uphill battle, but each year it gets a lot better. So I mean, not a lot better, but it's been very good. It's just constant improvement on it, so thank you.
And even better next year.
And even better next year. Get the rest of the comments. Thank you. Okay, moving on then to the monitoring report, which has to be approved tonight also. So again, we've had a chance to review this, a number of suggestions have been made. So is there any other thoughts or comments on this? Okay, hearing none, I'll move that we accept the 2023 water quality monitoring report from EOR as presented and this memo, and then we need a second then to this motion.
I'll second the motion, but I would like to add that I did have some questions directly for EOR when I did my review.
Okay,
And that was at the meeting, and so I haven't received any type of call or response to those, so I'm looking forward to that. Okay,
okay, so do you actually had written responses to them or questions
no, the questions that I discussed,
at the meeting?
yes, at the
Right,
meeting.
okay. So
Yeah.
Mike, maybe we should have that as a follow-up action, if that wasn't captured last time? Or at least maybe an estimated timetable on it, so.
Well, I think we can incorporate it into the
Final report,
request that I asked for a couple of meetings ago, maybe even a few months ago, to meet with EOR on the Comfort Lake diagnostic work, the focus work for our sub-watershed. And I had some questions on the diagnostic report, and I thought there were some things missing. And so I wanted to schedule that meeting, the board approved it. I reached out to EOR, but I haven't heard back yet.
okay,
I think Mike was gonna be included in that meeting as well, so I haven't heard back on that one, so maybe we can incorporate those answers into that meeting as well.
yeah, as long as it doesn't change the scope of work, if there's additional scope of work required, then the board should have to approve that.
Well, of course,
Yeah,
yeah, of
okay.
course.
All right. So moving on then. We've got item C then, which is we added at the beginning of the meeting.
Mr. Chair,
And yes,
I'm sorry, we still need a vote on the motion.
thank you very much, Chuck. Thank you. Yes, we've got a motion and a second. Lori, could you do the roll call vote?
Did we make a motion?
Yes, I read the motion
Oh,
and
sorry.
Manager Anderson
Second.
seconded it.
Sorry, that's my bad.
And then we got into the discussion and we got sidetracked until
All right.
Council
Manager
Holtman
Lowe-
got us on track.
Aye.
Lowe, okay. Manager Anderson,
I,
Manager Baki,
Aye.
President Schmaltz.
Aye. Motion carries. Now, moving on to the added item, which deals with shoreline restoration. As you know, we've all had much activity here lately, and three things have come up that we feel we should take some, that are timely right now, that we need to decide on. And what we're doing now is talking about the board approving staff to work on some of these items. And so I'll cover the first one. After our Lake Association meeting, there's an April 29th workshop scheduled by Aiden. And so we wanted to send out an invitation to all the Lake Association members. And so I drafted a cover letter on that to go with the schedule. And we probably should have that, some additional work that has to be done on that approved by the board. So let's go on to the second one. Mike, you want to talk about what's happening at the City of Forest Lake and the opportunity there?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. President, managers, even for the first item, that workshop is available to members of the public. So it's not just Forest Lake. And we'll make sure we get that out there, even though that's the target audience based off of the meeting that we had, attending the Orlando meeting. The city has been proposing to acquire a piece of property next to the funeral home, I think Matson Funeral Home, I believe, or formerly Matson. And so moving the boat launch over to that location, and then there's the potential to work with them on doing some different restoration on the current shoreline of the park area. So, you know, we would like to do some further engagement with them, but also, you know, perhaps come up with some strategies. You know, we could do some different examples of good, better, best, if you will, based off of Aiden's presentations, or something along that line. But this is a new opportunity and initiative that we could use and partner with the city on, to provide a demonstration location that's probably far more visible than anything else we could possibly come up with.
Yeah, I believe they have their first meeting coming up sometime in May. Is that correct, Mike?
Well, I think the city council, right, and but we could reach out to staff and start having that conversation well before that, of course.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't know that we've had much contact with the city, and this gives a good opportunity to start making that contact, and then eventually working with the city council, so they have firsthand knowledge of what we're trying to do.
Well, staff,
And then
you know, we do have they do have the regular coordination meetings, and there's been some discussion at the staff level, but just a month ago, I thought this whole thing was dead. You know, it wasn't going anywhere, but it seems like now all of a sudden it's come back.
Okay. And the last item was the relationship with the DNR. I think this came out of what's happened at the Lakewood Condo Association, and maybe you want to bring everybody up to date on that.
So district staff, Aiden was out with the DNR contractor and the representative from the homeowners association. It's 400 feet. It's very flat. Like other locations, they've lost some amount of frontage, which of course then extends the docks because the sediment is just going out into the lake. It's not necessarily disappearing or dissolving. So, you know, if they lose, say, 20 feet, and maybe they're adding 20 feet plus another 10 feet farther out as it settles. So the contractor who did not attend our training workshop was a strong proponent of the riprap, and by and large, that's kind of what the homeowners association felt like was their best option. Didn't really, I don't think, you know, the vision is it's mowed, pretty much mowed grass right to the very edge. And so one would not be surprised by its current condition, and nor should we be surprised in the future to see the final result end up with another ice heave, because the work has largely been completed. The DNR was very much trying to be a proponent of the natural shoreline option, at least for part of it, but at the end of the day, what the rules that they have to live by, so to speak, from the DNR standpoint, was such that if the applicant desired riprap for the whole 400 feet, they were allowed to do that. So, but we would like to do some further engagement with them and try to look to see if, but also just get a better understanding of how we could support the DNR and how the DNR could support us, because this won't be the last request for riprap on our lakes.
So I guess at this point in time, do we need to have a motion, or we just gonna, the board can agree to have staff go ahead and work ahead on these items? Is that
there should be at least a consensus if that's the board's desire.
Well, I say a hearty yes to that. I mean, our rules since 2007, 2008, I think when they were finally brought into being, does not recommend riprap, and it's a last resort. It's kind of like the staging of wetlands, stay away from it, and, if you have to, just, be as small as you can, your footprint. And then the last resort is, using the wetland for whatever purpose, but to do it right. And the same thing applies to the shorelines from the very beginning of the district. We wanted to get rid of the rocks. It wasn't natural to this area. And so it's been there all along. And I think we need to do what we need to do to get people to understand that that's not the first good practice to look at. It may be what they're used to, but it's not the best thing for the water. So I say yes.
okay? So is there any other suggestions, or does anybody disagree with moving ahead with these three parts of the restoration program? Okay, hearing none, I guess we can move ahead then, Mike. I do have one request though, Mike, on the cover letter. The meeting is on Monday night. Chris is going to send it out to the Lake Association, and I recognize that this is for everybody, obviously the public. But we're trying to put a little pressure on the Lake Association because we had the meeting and we want to follow up with a strong letter, et cetera, to see what kind of response we get and what we learned from this activity and how we position the message. So Chris is willing to send it in. So if I could have your comments back on that letter, Mike, it's in your mailbox with the slides and everything else. So feel free to change anything you think should be changed, and then we'll have Chris send it out, hopefully, depends on his schedule, but hopefully on Friday. So there's some lead time to Monday. Okay, if there's nothing else on that, then we'll move on then to the administrator report. Mike?
President Schmalz?
Yes, is that Manager Baki?
No, Manager Loth.
Manager Loth, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No problem. I just had a quick request on the final copy of that letter for the Lake Association. Can that
Right.
also be sent to my Yahoo email as well, just to make sure I get it?
Okay, I'll forward it to you then when I get back. Well, I'll wait till
Is it-
Mike makes his changes and then I'll send it to you finally.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, then moving on to the administrator report.
President, managers, I don't know if there's really much to add outside of what's on the report, so I can take your questions. We are looking to, thank you to Manager Loth. He's volunteered to have a meeting with somebody from Bowser on doing a little write-up on the projects for the delisting, so.
I'm not sure I followed that,
Yeah.
Mike, or the board did either. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, so Bowser wants to do a write-up on their Clean Water Fund projects. So related to the Bone Lake delisting, they've asked, if there's a local landowner that participated in any of the projects. And that we're currently doing. And so I explained that the Moody Lake was one that drains, in there. And it also highlights that approach that we use. So, because they do also want to incorporate something into the sequential diagnostic monitoring piece, a little further explanation, both for their own board, the Clean Water Council and other. I kind of talked it over and I explained that Doug was a board member, but he would understand the water quality component, far better than some of our other landowners that have participated in some of the past projects. And we've already had done an article with Mr. Mattson some years ago. So.
This is the last project we did.
Yeah,
Is it?
yeah. Well, that's great. We'll get some exposure then.
Yeah. We need to talk about that delisting thing though, as long as this is coming up. In the monitoring report, we know that there are other lakes that can be delisted right now. So on the next agenda, can we add that topic, please?
Specifically, the timing or just to
Yeah.
discuss it?
Well, they're ready. So according to the monitoring
How
report,
about
so it's,
timing and plan?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
I just have one question for Mike on his report.
Mike, go ahead, Manager.
There's nothing under Comfort Lake. All the lakes have something listed, but we have nothing. So one thing I did get that the board should know about, I think it came from the permit area, but I'd asked to be apprised of any activity on Highway 8, and apparently there are some new drawings for holding ponds that I received notice of, and so we are staying on top of that. I want to thank the staff for sending that info to me, but I think the board needs to be kept apprised of this. It's a big project, and it's going to take a long time to get it right. So if we could just make sure that those type of references are listed as well.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. Any other questions or on Mike's report? Okay, then we'll move on to EOR's report.
Good morning, good afternoon, Mr. President and managers. I have a couple updates for the engineer's report. WJD6 wetland plantings and final site cleanup are scheduled within the next couple of weeks, so we'll look forward to updates on that. Moody Capstone, there has been site restoration recently, and rain garden construction is about to begin, weather dependent, with plantings and final cleanup shortly thereafter. Monitoring for the 2024 season has begun, and we've been able to collect samples at both the long-term sites and the BMP effectiveness sites, which we're very excited about having flow there this year so early. And Greg is here to give an update on the City of Forest Lake North Shore Trail BMPs.
Thanks, Ann. Good evening, managers. Yeah, I just wanted to give the board a quick update on the city's project over off the North Shore Trail. If you recall, as part of the regional treatment planning, they had planned on installing some BMPs over there to do some offsetting treatment for potential redevelopment in the downtown area. They had started construction on those last year and ran into some issues with the contractor. And then they also, I guess, had some landowners that were not very excited about the features that were being installed out there. I'm not really sure if sounds like maybe they didn't have good kind of communications before the project started. Projects are all in the right of way, but of course, folks think that's part of their yard. So with that, it sounds like the city is planning on scaling back that project. So I think some of the BMPs will either be removed or reduced in size. There will still be, my understanding, couple BMPs there, so we will get some treatment, but not as much as originally planned, which is unfortunate. I think how we have the agreement set up is still, it'll still all work. Basically, the agreement stated there'd be a as-built survey done after the project, and we'd quantify the storage at that time. So I think things can all move forward, but just wanted to give the board an update and let folks know what's going on out there. So that's all I got. Happy to answer questions, and I can try to answer them best as I can.
Yeah, Greg, yeah, that was not the most popular project, and I think it didn't do us in the water quality world any favors, because it was ugly and it just, I mean, that first treatment thing was 6 feet deep. There's no fences on there. It fills up with water over 6 feet. One of the kids in the neighborhood could fall in there and drown. Instead of destroying the projects, can we just plant some hedges on both sides of it? That would hide hide it, and then it would also keep the kids and that from getting into it. That's a lot better strategy, I think, than trying to fill it in and lose the capability of the project and all the taxpayer money that went into it.
Yeah, the features were never intended to be that deep. That's not what the plans had. I think the contractor got overzealous, or I'm not really sure what exactly happened out there, but they were not excavated per plans, and then, you know, they weren't intended to have holding water either. So they were supposed to have a under drain and then an engineered media installed and then plantings on top of that. So, you know, what the landowners saw was not what the city had planned. You know, I think, I mean, it'd be nice if we could, you know, save it somehow, but at least what I've heard from the city engineer is, you know, they've gone to multiple board meetings and have just kind of gotten the earful, and I think they're just at the point where they're kind of giving in to the residents, I guess. So I'm not sure that there's a whole lot I can do. I mean, if the board wants to reach out to city council or something, but it sounds like they're already on a path to reduce the BMPs. They are going to keep a couple of them, I think, kind of on the northern stretch of that there is my understanding. I haven't seen the new plans yet. They're going to send them to me in the next week or two, I think.
Anybody else? I mean, the other thing is, it's not just a couple of people that drive by there. You know, there's got to be half the lake residents on that side of the lake drive by that application and see it every day. So it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So maybe we're better off burying it all. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, if it would have been built correctly, I mean, it could have been a nice showpiece that people could have driven by, but.
Can't they correct it? Can't they correct it?
Well, I think by putting shrubs around it would hide it. And
Yeah.
it would be fine, but I don't know. I mean,
Mr. President, Greg, do you think they could put some, or maybe the district could put some iron hand sand filter medium in there, so it would have holding capacity, large pore space, wouldn't provide the safety concern that President Schmaltz mentioned, but doesn't necessarily totally do away with the project? Could that possibly work?
well, if you put hedges around it, you don't have to cut it either because it'll let it grow then. So, I mean, to me, you only need hedges on that first one. That's so deep, I think. But I mean, a car could even fall in there and get stuck. So that's how deep it is.
You're talking about,
Drive up there, take a look at it.
County Road 50?
Yeah, North.
I think that one on 97 looks pretty bad.
So I don't know, do you think we want to talk to the city about that or not? I mean, or should we just forget about it?
Is
Yeah,
there a
I
safety
think-
problem?
I
Is
think
there a
there's-
safety concern?
Yeah, there's definitely a safety problem. I can't
Well-
imagine legal approved that without a fence around it, but
Well, yeah, I mean, the project never got finished, so that's not how it was supposed to be. I mean, there's lots of things that could be done there, but I think the city council is past the point where they want to do anything there. So I think it's outside of anything I can do as the district engineer. You know, board members or the administrator want to open those conversations back up with the city, I think that's fine, but
I think
my understanding is they've had multiple city council meetings, and I have a sense that they're not going to change direction.
Has the mayor been involved in this?
I would assume the mayor's informed on it.
I mean, she had to make a decision on it too, right? They had a vote on it. The council.
The city, that's my understanding, the city council. I haven't been involved in any of those meetings, but that was the message I got from Tim Olson from Bolton and Mink.
I could call the mayor and talk to her about it, but I'm not sure. I mean, to me, it's a little disappointing that they didn't contact us when they had the issue. But you know, that's worth a call of the mayor to begin with, I think, so.
We don't want to leave a mess on the landscape.
No,
We don't, and if it's identified as our project and we need to get their input for what, land purposes, permission, then I think we need to be proactive about that. We don't want to have an accident happen and then be cleaning up that mess. We had this over on Third Lake, one of the first projects we did in that little community with 5 houses. I think you were on a board then.
oh, yeah.
So, you know, we just don't want that kind of thing. We want to be more professional than that. We know it's a problem. Attack it. You maybe because it's in your
Why don't I
district.
call
you might-
Tim, I'll start with Tim Olson. Is the board willing to pay for the hedges? And then you said we might put an iron filter in there and fill it up with that and use the space up, or what do you think, Greg? Just off the top of your head. I don't want to take up too much time here. But
Yeah, well, I definitely don't think just planting hedges around it is the answer. You need to put in some sort of media in there to bring the bottom up and then put under drains. And so it could either be kind of a standard biofiltration feature, or if you wanted to add iron to enhance it, you could do that. So there's lots of things that could still be done there. So
Why don't we approach
yeah.
it in that manner? Is that there are multiple options that we can do to clean this up or repair it or whatever the right term is. But start with that. Start the dialogue.
Okay.
Mr.
That
Chair?
would be my recommendation.
Yeah, Council Holman?
Yeah, I'm, first, I'm afraid I'm not familiar right at hand with our formal role in this project. Whether it's something that we actually have a role in the design and construction or not, but what I haven't heard is
Can I answer that first? So we don't have any role in terms of the design or the construction. This was a city project. It was envisioned through the cooperative effort of the district and the city to come up with BMPs that could offset the downtown redevelopment. And so, Chuck, you had worked on the agreement related to this, I don't remember what it was called, memorandum of understanding or agreement or whatever it was, that basically said the city could construct these and then use the treatment to offset redevelopment downtown.
Right, okay, so I understand the project now. But the simple question I haven't heard, Greg, that you spoke to is if the contractor didn't construct it to the terms of the plans and specs, why didn't the city simply have the contractor correct his work?
My understanding is they tried to, and just didn't ever get anywhere. My understanding is that they have terminated that contractor and plan on hiring a new contractor to come in and restore the areas and finish the BMPs that will remain.
So there was a plan.
Yeah,
Is that
well,
right?
I have not seen the plan yet, but that was the phone call that I got last week, was that there will be a plan coming that shows those changes.
Okay, so somebody's taking action on it already, the city.
Well, why don't I call Tim anyway and see what, I mean, just filling it is one thing, but if they try to improve by filling it up with media or iron sand filter, that would be a different story. That's what we would like to see happen, right? And not just lose it. Or at least
Yep.
make it look a lot better, so.
Yep, for sure.
So I'll call Tim and report back then. So, thanks for that update, Greg.
Mhm.
Yep.
Mr. President, if I may, please, I might suggest that Greg and I coordinate with the city first, and then we'll report back to you.
Okay,
Yeah,
So we could
I like-
speak, Greg could speak more tactically on the engineering side. So
yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, good idea.
yeah.
you've
I
got plenty to
agree.
do. So, thank you.
Okay, moving on then, is anything else from EOR then on that, on your
Sorry.
report? Ann, are you finished?
Yes, and we look
Okay.
forward to meeting with Jackie. We'll schedule
Okay.
that with you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Smith Partners, Council Holman?
Nothing to report, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. And then report of treasurer?
Yes, we had income of $13,283.55 this past month in March. The bulk of that was $8,100 for a permit. I assume that's a big development coming in, so that's always good to see. That's activities continuing. My computer is really not working. Here we go. Yeah, thank you. We had total expenses for March of $113,172.66. And so those are the bills that need to be paid, along with, of course, our payroll, that's part of it. So the cash balances, you can see look good in the funds, and I did not receive a transfer email, so if you have that.
She sent it at like 5:30 tonight.
Oh, well, that's why I didn't get it. So if you can read the transfer amount.
Give me just a second.
Okay.
Let me stop sharing the screen. Oh, sorry. Okay. It is $74,000.
Even? That's unusual. Good.
I want you to, I'm gonna show this to you guys. Okay, back. Can I turn that right there?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Transfer amount is $74,000. So we have bills to pay of $137,112.75 and a transfer to be made of $75,000. Thank you. I'll make that motion.
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
Okay.
Tori, you want to do the roll call vote?
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
President Schmaltz.
Aye, motion carries.
Did you got Doug?
Doug is gone.
Oh, he's gone?
Dropped
Okay.
off, yeah, I think. Report of officers and managers. Chris, you want to start?
Thank you, President Schmaltz. I just wanted to thank Mike and Aiden is not on the call, but thank them for coming to the Lake Association meeting we had last Thursday. They did a fantastic job presenting the shoreline information. I think it was a shock to a lot of people to see how bad Forest Lake is compared to the other lakes. And I think it really opened the eyes of a lot of people. So hopefully over time we can sustain some sort of progress in this effort. But I think it was a good starting point. I think we had a great attendance. I think it was, frankly, I just think it's quite shocking for individuals. And when I moved down the lake in 2012, I was completely out of the know of this information. So got to start with information and convincing people what the right practices are doing, and hopefully get them to cooperate versus having to, react like we are trying to react with the 400 feet that, has already been done. So Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, but we had a total of almost 200 people there, so without speakers and board managers and that, so
Fantastic.
it was really full, so well done.
Mhm.
See, then who's next? Manager Baki?
Yes, Tom Furry is the current president of our Bone Lake Association, and he's very actively involved in tree planting. And so last Saturday, he loaded up his pontoon on Bone Lake with cuttings of red dogwood, sandbar willow, and black willow, and he went around the lake, and he had contacted people ahead of time and said, would you like some trees planted on your lake shore? And so that's what he did last Saturday. For a couple hours, he was planting these willow trees. And like he said, every little bit helps. So I just want to give him some kudos for his work in tree planting. He also has developed a nursery with grant money in which he buys and sells the trees at his cost, and primarily to Lakeshore residents in the community. So kudos to Tom.
It's great to hear. Just, I don't want to jump to a tactic, but this sounds like it might be an opportunity to have the paper write an article about what he's doing and then expand it into the problem we've got and how he's trying to solve that problem one tree at a time. Be kind of an interesting article, so.
Angie did one on him not too long ago. Yeah,
So
he's been on our CAT committee for a long time. And
Yeah.
this happened after that big tornado that hit
Right.
he's on,
Bone Lake.
yeah, is he on Bone? Yeah,
Yes.
Bone, I was gonna say Keewatin. But anyway, after it hit Bone and all those big trees came down, and he started talking about that right away, within a month or two of that big storm, and boy, he stuck with it. What an example of what one person can do.
Right.
It's amazing. We should think about, we've talked about this in the past, but maybe now that we have a marketing firm on board, we can actually get some type of citizen commendation that we can give to people who do this kind of outstanding work.
And get it in the paper's coverage.
Well, yeah, I mean, we started it with the first State of the Watershed meeting, where we had those awards that we were going to give out, but we don't do it anymore. COVID came, of course, so it's off, but we should do, without that type of structure, we can send out a commendation from the board for good work. And a formal letter, let's make sure they know that we understand and are appreciative of the work that the individual can do.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. President, managers, I'll remind the board that it's the district's 25th anniversary, and we are planning an event in September. And that would be perhaps an opportune time to make such recognition of volunteers, as well as other exemplary citizens in that regard. So, and we have at that time given out recognition and awards.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully that's part of the marketing plan we're going to see. So that's good.
Okay, anything else, Manager Baki?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jackie?
Nothing really to report.
Okay, and I have nothing to report either. So, next up would be then summary and approval of board direction. Council Holman, do we have anything we've captured tonight?
Several items, Mr. Chair. First, staff will get recent MREP reports to the managers and make sure that you are all on the MREP distribution list. Second, Manager Anderson has her outstanding questions on EOR's monitoring report, and we'll fold that into her upcoming meeting with EOR on the Comfort Lake subwatershed. Manager Anderson asked that the next agenda include a discussion of the delisting status and plan for the district's lakes. And then Administrator Kinney and Mr. Grasky will talk with city staff and report to you on the Forest Lake project before you would make any further contact with city officials.
Okay, are there any additions or corrections to that report? Okay, hearing none, then we'll set then. Let's, I'll entertain a motion for, are there any other comments or thoughts before we adjourn? Okay, hearing none, then, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Manager Lowe.
What, we need a motion first.
Oh, sorry.
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 So
I'll make the motion to, or second, Manager Anderson's.
Yeah.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. Thanks, Chris. Now, Troy, we can,
Okay.
she's anxious to go.
Lowe.
Aye.
Manager Anderson.
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
President Schmaltz.
Aye. Meeting adjourned. We can all go home. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right on.
Good night.
Good night.
Yeah, I tried to keep. it.
6:30 to 8:30. We're done.
We're actually